Hi, this is Catherine Morgan from Point A to Point B Transitions, and welcome to this episode of Evolving Working. I am a career transition expert and business consultant to consultants, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Susan Eckstein.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Eckstein. I'm a women's empowerment expert, certified coach, facilitator, and a speaker. And in a nutshell, I help women stop shrinking so they can have the confidence to be seen, be heard, and take up space.
And today we are joined by my friend and colleague, Heather Bennett. Heather, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, Catherine. Susan, it's so nice to see both of you, and thank you so much for having me on. My background, I have an MBA. I'm also certified as a board of directors member and qualified to serve. In addition, I've spent the last 20-something years as a business and career coach, primarily for executives and entrepreneurs.
And your corporate background was in?
My corporate background before that was in consumer packaged goods. So I've worked for some of the probably companies that you all have products in your house right now for.
Beloved household brands.
Exactly.
So women on the board of directors for companies is a topic that is so current right now. And for whatever reason, my feeds that I follow are not talking about this enough or in the way that I was hoping to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So between Susan's expertise in women's empowerment and the fact that you're currently seeking board positions and recently got certified to be on boards, even though you're probably totally qualified before your certification, I want to dive into it, but I want to set the stage just really quickly that the NASDAQ has said that companies of a certain size need to disclose if they do not have at least 2 diverse members of their board. And that's interesting. And then there's some recent statistics from the women accounted for 45% of new board appointments for Fortune 500 companies in 2021, according to Heidrick and Struggles annual US Board Monitor report. And here's the really, really juicy part. Women made up 45% of new appointments, up from 41% in 2020. The gender balance of Fortune 500 boards has steadily shifted the last several years, with women accounting for 29% of boards, up from 19% in 2015. Mm-hmm. So a 10% lift in 7 years. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there with those statistics. Of course, I also have an R&D background. So when you're looking at data, you always have to think about what the numbers behind the numbers. So you notice that it's 45% of new appointees. So we still have a long way to go, especially as I'm sure with the employment numbers right now, women make up over 50% of the workforce. So if you think about that from a perspective, and there's a lot going on behind that, how that breaks down. But if you think about that, then really moving boards towards 50-50 makes a lot of sense just from that statistic. In addition, there's been a lot of research done on boards that have 2 or more women on them versus ones that have 0. And consistently, just from an ROI perspective, the returns on investment, the annual revenue, like the financials are just incredible. When you have 2 or more women on the boards, there's more success. The company is much more successful. And that research, I mean, it's from like the World Economic Forum, it's from Catalyst, it's from a number of sources. So these are real numbers. And when you start looking at that and think of how, stakeholders, specifically shareholders, are having more and more of a voice at the table when it comes to running companies from a higher level strategic or board area, you have to think that they're going to want that board to be the best it can be. You're creating a team that you want to be successful, Olympic level, amazing. And if having exceptional finance is what you want, then of course you're going to want to make sure you have at least 2 women on the board.
Yeah, so we're not just paying lip service to this.
No.
We're not just saying, like the photo ops for the high school
Yeah.
yearbook. It's not that. This is a
No.
financial ROI on this decision. This is becoming an employer of choice, a
Oh, that's a whole nother area.
well, or a company that can just do better in the stock market if that's the game they're playing, if they're a public company. Right? You want to be profitable.
And to your point as well, I mean, one of the largest issues that's hitting upper management, whether it's the C-suite or the board level right now, is employee engagement and employee retention. If you want to attract top talent, if you want to keep your top talent, if you want to keep your employees, then you need to show them at the C-suite level, at the board level, that you represent not just them, but that you have their best interest at heart. And that's, I'm trying to think who was talking about that. There was another study done that employee retention, I think it's something pretty high, and like 80%, it's like 60 to 80% of employees that were in the study, asked whether or not they would stay with the company. The ones that would tended to have at least 1 woman on the board. And you start seeing statistics like that when, human capital, like human resources, are the most important thing right now.
Expensive. Okay, that's a different topic.
Right. This is what I'm saying. I'm like, we could go down a few roads here.
Yeah,
there's a lot behind all of this.
That's its own conversation. I'd love to have you back if you wanted to riff on that. But let's dive into this board thing.
Mm-hmm.
We've shown that there are new women on boards, the membership on boards is increasing. Mm-hmm. There's some legislative push to make this happen. So as a woman, I can't imagine participating in that kind of board, but you're dying to do it. And you went through a certification process to be board qualified. What did that entail?
Well, if you look at what board service is, it's primarily 2 things. It's oversight of the management, so hiring, firing the CEO, and more importantly, it's providing that higher level advisory and strategy. And in order to do that, you need to really have a holistic understanding of business and be willing at times to get into the weeds. I actually really enjoy going into a P&L and figuring out which lines in, the financial documents link up to performance, or how that's going to impact, the brand, or what type of marketing we should be doing, or, which areas of M&A we should be exploring. So it's really having a holistic view, where you can have the oversight of the entire strategy of a company and what their mission is, and being able to tie that directive to all the stakeholders, and then to be able to get the results of that by having that good advisory to the C-suite, to the leadership team.
Okay, so let's dive into the juicy part of the inner game of a woman who's been successful in her career, is highly qualified, might have always had this idea, is like, ooh, if I were on the board, here's what I'd do. Or she saw some decisions from the top that were just a train wreck, and she's like, I could do better than that. What do you think would inspire a woman to want to do that, or would potentially hold her back? What did you see in your cohort?
Yes, and so the cohort you're talking about, it's ACE LLC runs training to create very strong candidates for boards of directors. This is Michelle Ashby. She's lovely. You should have her on the show. She's fantastic. And what she did in her research, she found that women, and this is probably another statistic that from your career and employment work, is that women will apply to jobs when they have 100% of the qualifications. Men will apply to jobs when they have 60% of the qualifications. It's just a different mindset. And women will shy away from those leadership roles because they don't feel they have all the qualifications. Whereas really, optimally, you probably want to hire someone who has close to, but not all of the qualifications, because you want them to get their skin in it, basically to grow and become stronger with the role and to advance, because if they have all the qualifications, they can do the job, they may not stay that long. So you want someone who's going to be able to have an opportunity to grow and be inspired by that role. So that's, I think, what one of the things that's holding women back is they don't feel that they're qualified when really they are. They really are. More are than aren't. From that perspective. And in terms of who would want to do the work, again, I found the women in my cohort excited about the work, especially once they had the opportunity, because they're all in their own industries. They're all in their own fields. They've got their own jobs. They may not necessarily be privy to everything that happens at a board level, but then to have been given the opportunity to really understand it in a very intense course. And they will all say that. This was not what I would call easy or light work.
This is not finishing school for
No,
female executives.
no. There was a lot of homework, a lot of meetings in between sessions. It was very thorough, and there was a very extensive test at the end to get certified. So this is very thorough, and that's important because you want a candidate to go into the board ready to work and ready to work hard and ready to give their best. So I think the women who are interested, they find the work exciting and they find the purpose in it, because by guiding these companies towards success, strengthening the, not just the company or the industry, but the economy by doing this work, it's really, I feel it's a calling, and many of the women in my cohort felt the same way. They felt an obligation to make their industries better, to make these companies better.
That was really helpful to get into the mindset, but I'm going to ask Susan, because I know she must have been chomping at the bit when she heard the part about women need to have 100% and guys will apply for things when they have 60%. I know you coach high-performing women. What do you see around this?
I see exactly what Heather has said, where women will hesitate, at least the women that I've spoken to and worked with, they hesitate from putting themselves out there, like you said, because they feel like they lack something, that they acknowledge that some of the men that they work with, they don't necessarily have it either, but they are willing to put themselves front and center and go for it. Whereas I've worked with some women in the C-suite who will say, I am embarrassed that I still feel like I lack something that I know that I have. I know that I'm smart enough to be in the room, but I still don't feel 100% empowered to be there, like I deserve to be there. And I think that that's happening at all levels. It's not just someone who's just starting out and sort of finding her way. There are women who carry that all the way up as far as they are, and they're embarrassed to even say it out loud and acknowledge it. But I think a lot of us are still feeling that way.
I can tell you with 100% certainty they are, because I've talked to them, and I've talked to women executives who have billion-dollar P&Ls, and they still struggle with this imposter syndrome, or, well, I understand this really well, but the numbers part kind of throws me a little bit, or there's some part of it that's a little wobbly for them, and then that one little bit seems to say, oh no, I couldn't do that. You were with, Heather, a bunch of women who are highly qualified, very successful in their career, and they still struggled with occasional feelings like, what am I doing? Is anyone going to take me seriously? I'm going to go through this course. Is anybody going to offer me a board position? How am I going to do this? What was some of the advice that came out either from the group within itself or from the leadership of the group, is how women could step forward and claim this?
That's so true. Yeah, this was a very impressive group of women. I mean, many PhDs, many people with higher level degrees who had been running massive companies and we're in the C-suite. So yes, these are exactly what you were talking about, Susan. They very much had the why me? Why would I be able to do this? How could why am I even here? So I want to hear what Susan has to say for this question too, because I think there's as much good advice as can be given around this, the better. So a lot of the advice that we got was, primarily take time to recognize what you have accomplished. When you are, a high-powered, driven individual who works for success, you don't always take the time to write down your successes, to acknowledge them, and think of it almost like capturing what I would call resume bits. So when you do accomplish something, the recommendation was to have a file or, physical or digital, where you put this information. One of the things I do, I have in my calendar on certain days that repeat every single week. I have one that's specifically how to make my business more successful. So when I come across something really amazing that I'm like, I need to remember this, I'll put it there. I have other ones for successes. I have a specific thing in my calendar once a month that's on repeat. So I continue to add successes to it so that if I'm having a day where I need to remember that, I go to that and remember it. So just recognizing your successes, I think, was one of the ways. And another way that worked very well was understanding that if you don't know something, that's okay, because you can learn it. And more importantly, at that higher level, or when you've been in business that long, you normally know the right person to go to ask the right question. And that level of networking takes time, but is exceptionally valuable. So those would be the two things I would say. Susan, I want to hear your answer to this.
Me too.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Being able to write down your successes and your strengths and looking at that often just reminds you of how far you've come and how much you have to offer. And then what I would add to that is being willing to say, okay, what are you thinking about? What's going on in your head? What beliefs do you hold around why you don't feel like you belong in the boardroom? And let's unpack some of that, because some of that thinking and those beliefs can go way back. And women are often surprised to say, I can't believe that I feel that way about women's role in society. Some women very high on the food chain might feel deep down inside that they are there to support men. I have a friend who tells a story about she finally got onto the executive committee, an all-male executive committee, and she walked in the room and the president looked at her and said, hey, so-and-so, do us a favor, can you take notes today? And instead of saying something about it, she sort of fell into that role. And afterwards she pushed back and said, I'm just curious, why did you ask me? And he said, because any meeting we're in, whenever you take notes, you do it the best, it's most thorough. And she struggled being in that role for a while. And then finally, one day she got into the meeting and she said, hey guys, I think we should all take turns, or we should bring someone in who's willing to take notes for us. And she was finally willing to stand up, but she didn't even realize until that moment that she was allowing herself to fall into that role, because on some level she felt that that's the role that she should play, and being willing to look at things in a different way and go, I don't have to play this role. I can step in and I can be equal with everybody else sitting in the room. Sometimes we have to go in and we have to unpack what's really driving us to shrink, to not speak up, to not fully be confident in a situation when we know that we deserve to be there.
Or we know intellectually that we deserve to be there, but there may be some gremlins in our subconscious that poke their head up occasionally and say, who do you think you are? What are you doing? You're going to get slapped if you show up. Like, we I spent half of middle school in the hallway because I know this is going to shock you. I was a bit of a smart ass. So, so if I were going for that kind of role, I could get, well, you know what? No one's going to take me seriously. I'm going to get shut out of the conversation. I'm going to get sent to the hallway. Or, maybe even worse, if you were the bright, bubbly, articulate child who was always asking questions and stuff, your parents might have just, only from exhaustion, not even from bad intent, might have been like, oh my God, would you please just be quiet for a while? Heather has a whole brood, so she may have experienced that once in a while. But we do, I think it is important to look at what society tells us and what we may have personally experienced in our community or family of origin as women. Heather, I know you do career transition stuff too. When people are interviewing, this kicks up a bunch of, I want to be seen. I want to get the job. I want to get the job offer. Oh my God, don't see me. I don't want to brag about myself. I don't want to promote myself, but I'm guessing this is the same thing in the board conversation. We want to step up. We want to ask to be considered. We want to make a recommendation if we're actually on the board. But oh my goodness, is anybody going to take me seriously? I'm going to get slapped down. Am I going to be humiliated in front of the board? I've had, a bunch of times senior level people go off on me when I made suggestions in the room for whatever reason. What do you see?
It's so interesting you talk about being able to brag about yourself, being able to, and I actually, in my book, I have an entire section on how to do that, because I think we don't give ourselves permission. And it's one thing to say you should brag about yourself. It's another thing to give people the tools on how to do it. So like clear, simple steps, because and I specifically talk about for our career transitions, the interview process for that moment, because you have to brag about yourself. You are your only shot. Your entire sales team is you during that interview, and you have such a limited amount of time. And the interview process is so, it's long and cumbersome now. I'm hoping that this post-pandemic, it will evolve to be something a little more gracious for everyone involved. It's not right now. I think it's an evolution, just a little bit, we can hope. But that is something I definitely say, it's hard to stand up for yourself. I will say part of the advice that we got during the course was to be prepared. Arrive early, do your homework, and be prepared. And most people who get to that level, and Susan, maybe you could talk about this, they're more prepared than they think they are. And they tend to be the type of people who do not go into meetings unprepared. So, so really leaning back on that and understanding that you have a team of, we'll say, information that you bring, and to be confident in that can make all of the difference.
I have a very good friend who was recently appointed president of a board, and she's played several roles on the board, and just recently, actually last week, became the president. And we were talking over the weekend about it, and it's like you said, she has a laundry list of things of how, what she wants to do. She's very focused. She understands the vision. She's gone in, she's incredibly prepared and super excited. It's what you'd said earlier, Heather, about, the vision you working towards the vision and the purpose of the organization. And she's so excited about it, and just brings an incredible energy and enthusiasm and curiosity to the role. And she's incredibly prepared. And there are a handful of other women on the board as well, but having this role, she feels a lot of pressure, but she's also excited to really lean in and lead this board in an organization, lead the board and the organization in a way that has never been done before.
I love it.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
I want to chime in. One thing I tell clients in interviews, and you're interviewed for a board position, so it is an interview process. I make it less about the bragging thing. I take the emotion out of that and say, if you don't give them the information that they need to come to the conclusion that you are the right candidate, you have done them a disservice.
I like that. It's like a well-written LinkedIn profile. You're not writing it about or for yourself. You're writing it for the person who's reading it.
Yeah, exactly. But that takes some of the squishy, out for people. Oh, well, I'm just giving them the information that they need to come to the conclusion that I'm the right candidate. Okay, well, that makes perfect sense. And it's less about me. It's more about, well, you could say me, the consumer packaged good, me, the product, or my value to the organization, which I'm sure you talk to people about all the time. It's not about you. It's about what you can do for them. More or less, they'd like a happy employee, but that's secondary to, to the value you can provide them. Just how it is, folks. All right, well, this has been good. Let's go around and give one suggestion for how women can show up or consider possibility for this. What would you suggest, Heather? Should more women, how do you inspire more women to think, maybe a board? Maybe it doesn't have to be, a Fortune 500 board. It could be a nonprofit board. It could be the board of your co-op or condo. I mean, just how do you show up and be part of the leadership? What would you say?
Well, there's a interesting, I like that you use the word leadership. There's an interesting study that was done quite a few years ago called the Athena Doctrine, where it was like 64, are you guys familiar with it? 64,000, there's a really good TED talk on it too, if people want the Cliff Notes version. 64,000 people from around the world, it was like 13 or 14 countries were interviewed for this study. And what it found is half the people they interviewed, and they listed a number of personality traits, basic ways of describing, human traits, like how you would describe a human. And half of the group was asked, which of these represent like leadership and are important for success, leadership, et cetera. And then half of them said which ones of these are feminine and which ones are masculine. And interestingly enough, the ones that were specifically for leadership fell into the feminine category. It's a nice double-blind study there. But
bye-bye soft skills, really important
right.
leadership skills.
Interesting, right? So to inspire women to really think about becoming leaders is there's a need there. There's a need for powerful leadership. And what I like to reflect on when I think of leadership is servant leadership, because I believe that is one of the strongest and best ways to look at how to be a good leader is to really listen well to everyone you're working with, all the stakeholders, and really be willing to serve the people that you're in the organization. So and I love that you talked about the different ways people can be involved. I sit on 2 nonprofit boards, recently back on one, and am the chair of another, co-chair. And that experience, because I was very quickly put into the executive committee for that board, and then very quickly moved up to co-chair. And it was exactly, Susan, for the reason you said, is I was able to describe the mission and vision and the tactical way to get there in a way that the board members, a lot of our board members have been on the board for like 30 years. Mm-hmm. They are excited about the direction that the leadership team has come up with for the organization. So it's understanding that if you have that vision and you want to inspire people to do great things, then there's a role out there for you. It could be nonprofit. It could be a small private company. It could be, Fortune 500. And to your point, it could be the board of your condo association, and really looking, or neighborhood association, looking for opportunities to, as the leader, really serve a community or an organization. Go for it. If you're passionate and you're excited, why not? So go for it.
Oh, that's lovely. Susan, how do we silence some of the gremlins that say, not enough, no one will think of us, they'll think I'm a biatch? Like, how do we get rid of some of that?
Well, I just want to just echo what Heather said, which is the servant leadership. And if this is something that a woman just feels pulled to, and I really believe it's not something that we're checking off. It's something that we feel pulled to do, that there's a reason that you feel pulled for that. And if you feel pulled, but yet you say, I don't deserve to sit around that table or be in that role, you have to be willing to say, okay, what's really going on here? What am I afraid of? What do I need to clean up? What beliefs do I need to put down? And that might seem like an easy process. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, and it's messy. But if you feel pulled to serve and lead in that way, you are that resistance that you're feeling, that is the call that yes, you need to do it. And you need to start figuring out what's going on and be willing to say and admit, I feel like an imposter here. I don't want to feel like an imposter here anymore. What can I do? How can I change? How can I look at this differently? And how can I give myself permission to step into that? And just that lens of looking at it differently, the energy that produces, it's so much bigger, and knowing that you're there because you want to serve. You're making it about others instead of yourself. When you're saying I'm an imposter, you're making it all about you. When you're feeling pulled to serve, okay, then you're meant to explore that, and you make it about other people, and that takes a lot of the pressure off.
And remember, folks, excitement and anxiety feel very similar in the body. So if you get this zzz feeling, that can be good. If you're excited, if you're curious, if it's, go for it, as Susan said. Don't let that stop you. Ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. Like we need you. If you feel you have something to contribute, you probably do. So I'm going to leave that there. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining us. Thank you, as always, Susan, my glorious co-host. And this has been Evolving Working.